Yoshida had a dinner date with the girl he has been dreaming about. During the date, he was caught up in a staring contest with her chest, and Eri expressed her gratitude for the lovely evening. Yoshida finally gathered the courage to ask her to be his girlfriend, but unfortunately she politely declined, stating that she has already been in a relationship for 5 years. Feeling rejected, Yoshida spent time with his friend, expressing his frustration and wishing that Eri had said something about her relationship earlier. As the night grew late, Yoshida's friend decided to head home, leaving him to walk home alone, feeling angry and upset with Eri. As he strolls along, Yoshida spots a girl sitting beneath a street lamp and wonders why she's out at such a late hour. Concerned for her safety, he approaches her and inquires about what she's doing. He suggests that she should go home, but the girl responds that there are no more trains running. Yoshida is surprised and asks if she intends to stay there all night. The girl smiles and suggests that she could stay at his place. She addresses him as Mr. and asks him what kind of girl would stay at a stranger's place. She then reveals that she has nowhere else to go and no money to pay for accommodation. Yoshida is taken aback by her proposition and asks if he's expected to let her stay for free. To his surprise, the girl offers to have sex with him in exchange for a place to stay. Yoshida is alarmed by her words and wonders if all girls these days are like this. He eventually realizes that she's just a peculiar individual and firmly tells her not to make such jokes. The girl insists that Yoshida should let her stay for free, despite the state of his filthy apartment. Yoshida feels that it's not his problem to learn about her and plans to kick her out the next morning. He goes to bed and allows her to do as she pleases. However, she starts to undress and asks if he wants to do anything with her. Yoshida refuses and tells her that he's attracted to older women. The girl then asks if she can do anything for him, to which he responds by requesting miso soup made by a woman. Yoshida dozes off, leaving the girl alone with her thoughts. The next morning, Yoshida awakens and panics, thinking that he's late for work, only to remember that it's a Sunday. He smells something cooking and hears the girl greeting him with a cheerful, "Good morning." Yoshida wakes up confused and doesn't remember what happened the previous night. He questions why a high school girl is in his house, but she reminds him that he had agreed to let her stay. Yoshida is initially skeptical of her claim, but she insists that he did indeed agree to it. Worried that he may have done something inappropriate, Yoshida asks if he did anything to her. The girl stares at him, causing him to feel uneasy, but she assures him that she's just joking. She tells him that he refused to engage in any sexual activity with her, which he's relieved to hear. She then prepares miso soup for him, but Yoshida warns her not to make soup at a stranger's house. The girl points out that he was the one who asked for it and continues to call him Mr. Irritated by her nickname. Yoshida tells her to stop and asks her to leave. She questions if he really doesn't remember anything from the previous night, but Yoshida is still puzzled. As his memories start to return, he recalls her presence. The girl then asks for his name, and Yoshida introduces himself. She comments that he looks like a Yoshida and urges him to eat the soup she prepared. Irritated by her bossy behavior, Yoshida tells her not to tell him what to do. As Yoshida eats the miso soup, he realizes that it tastes good. The girl next to him asks if he would have preferred Eri to make it instead. Yoshida wonders how she knows Eri, and she reveals that he was saying her name in his sleep last night. Yoshida is taken aback and tells her that he doesn't need her to make him feel better. However, the girl begins to undress, revealing that she has large breasts. Yoshida is shocked and compares them to Eri's, which he thinks are even bigger. The girl asks him what cup size Eri is, and Yoshida tells her that they're F cups. She boasts that hers are also F cups, and adds that Eri's might be a G or H cup. Yoshida wishes he could have felt those H cups just once, but the girl interrupts his thoughts by asking if he wants to feel hers. Yoshida asks her why she's trying to seduce him. Sayu asks Yoshida why he keeps refusing her advances, and wonders if he's the abnormal one because no man has ever turned her down before. Yoshida grabs her and demands to know her name. Sayu reveals her real name and shows him her student ID, which indicates that she's from a distant location. Yoshida asks when she left home, and Sayu confesses that she's been gone for 6 months. She believes her family is better off without her. Yoshida questions how she plans to survive without going home or to school, and Sayu replies that she'll figure something out, like finding another place to stay. He suggests that she should work instead. After she tells him that she can't afford rent with just a part-time job, he offers to let her live with him. He stands up and says he'll knock some sense into her, calling her a brat who doesn't understand the value of things. She starts crying, and he wonders why she can't have a normal life and love like other teenagers. He decides to make her do the chores around the apartment as her first job. She comments that it sounds like she can stay with him forever, but he clarifies that she can only stay until she figures out what she wants to do. Yoshida thinks that this arrangement is better than letting Sayu continue to wander around and possibly fall into dangerous situations. However, he knows he needs to be cautious with his words so that she doesn't get too comfortable with the situation. He makes it clear to her that she can only stay until she stops behaving like a brat, and warns her that if she tries to seduce him again, he'll have no choice but to kick her out. She agrees to his conditions, and so begins a new chapter in their lives. At his workplace, Yoshida confides in his friend about what happened after he left home. His friend cautions him about the potential risks of the situation. As Yoshida returns home, he worries about whether or not Sayu has eaten anything. He remembers his friend's advice about not getting too attached to her. Upon arriving home, he finds Sayu preparing food, and she greets him with the words, "Welcome home, Daddy." He expresses his disgust at the comment and hands her the bento he bought for her. He notices that she has ironed all of his clothes, and he thinks to himself that she is good at doing chores. When he asks her where the ashtray is, she gives it to him, washed. After stepping out to smoke, Sayu questions why Yoshida doesn't smoke inside. He responds that it's because she's there, to which she calls him nice. However, Yoshida gets frustrated, asking why she's basing her values on those other guys. He tries to explain that he's not nice, but rather the other guys were just bad, and that she should have higher standards for herself. Sayu says that she understands, but Yoshida can't help but wonder why he's the only one taking care of her like a guardian. He reflects on how the world is full of awful people, including himself for providing her with a place to stay and enabling her to run away. He's unsure of what he should do next. The next morning, Yoshida hears Sayu in pain and finds out that she has been wearing the same clothes every day. Sayu tells him that it's the only thing she has. Feeling sympathetic, Yoshida decides to take her to a mall to buy her new clothes and a new mattress, since she wakes up in pain every morning. Sayu tries to refuse, saying that she won't know how to repay him. However, Yoshida realizes that she's not being modest, but instead is hesitant, because she cannot repay him. He wonders why a child would think like that, and tells her that doing chores for him is enough of a repayment. Sayu agrees, and Yoshida feels that this should be enough of a reason. After sleeping on her new mattress, Sayu expresses her satisfaction with it, and asks Yoshida if he wants to sleep with her with a teasing smirk. However, she quickly assures him that she wasn't being weird, and that he's the one with dirty thoughts. Yoshida finds her laughter endearing, and she thanks him for everything. The next day, his friend tells him about a rumor that Yoshida has a new girlfriend, because he seems cleaner, better dressed, and goes home early. Yoshida thinks that Sayu isn't his type, but acknowledges that she's cute and responsible. He wonders why she left her home and came all the way to Tokyo. The following day, Sayu asks Yoshida why he doesn't shave his facial hair, and he replies that he's lazy. She wonders why he doesn't shave it more often, and he explains that he only shaves it when it gets too long because it makes him feel old. He says that being too lazy to shave is a sign of getting old, but Sayu disagrees and tells him that his facial hair doesn't look good on him. Yoshida looks at himself in the mirror and decides to shave his facial hair. During their mall trip, Yoshida purchases more things for Sayu and inquires if she owns a phone. Sayu admits that she doesn't have one and confesses that she threw her old phone into the ocean. Yoshida chides her for such a foolish act and suggests that she should get a phone so that he can contact her. Sayu argues that she doesn't really need one since he already got her moisturizer, but he notices that her smile seems insincere and wonders if it's genuine. After returning from the mall, Yoshida tells Sayu that he plans to read the books he bought on the weekends, but he also offers her the chance to read them without spoiling them for him. However, he notices that she looks sad and is about to ask him why he is so, but stops herself and claims it's nothing. When he urges her to speak up, she starts fake laughing. Yoshida realizes that she's forcing herself to smile and tells her to stop. He reminds her that although it may not be her home, she's allowed to live there and doesn't need to act strangely or fake her smiles. She approaches him and admits that she was going to ask why he's so kind, and that he's the kindest person she's ever met. She adds that if he wants her to stop acting weird, she will try to do so. She explains that her fake smiles have become a habit for her, but she'll do her best to stop. He reassures her that she can take her time, and she thinks he's really kind. She confesses that no one has ever given her this much freedom or choices before, and she wants to make him happy that she came into his life. He chuckles and compliments her for being kind as well, and he's looking forward to her cooking and expects great food. She promises not to let him down. During work, he summons Mishima to inform her that their project's code has bugs and cannot be sold. He explains that they will need to work overtime together to fix it. Ari observes their conversation. They spend the entire night working on the project, and Yoshida brings Mishima food. She asks him about how he has been shaving his beard every day. He wonders why she's asking, and she mentions the rumors about him having a girlfriend. He denies the rumors and admits that he was recently rejected by Eri. Mishima offers him words of encouragement, but he declines any pity. She reassures him that she genuinely feels lucky to be his friend and suggests they go out for drinks soon. Upon arriving home late, Sayu expresses her frustration to him for being tardy and even having food prepared for him. He apologizes for the delay, but she just chuckles and reveals that she was only joking. Although he tells her not to tease him, she finds it amusing how he apologized so formally and suggests that he eats the food the next day. He realizes the need to find a way to contact her if he's running late. At the phone store, Yoshida's friend suggests that he should have asked Sayu what color phone she would prefer. Yoshida responds that Sayu would have likely refused if he had asked, so he decided to buy it without her input. His friend notes that Yoshida must really like Sayu since he is putting so much effort into choosing the design. Yoshida explains that because Sayu is a girl, she would care about the design of the phone. His friend points out that this means Yoshida cares about her happiness and advises him to be careful in his interactions with her. He warns Yoshida that Sayu might develop feelings for him or vice versa, and Yoshida assures him that it's impossible because he prefers older women with larger breasts. His friend laughs and suggests that Yoshida choose a safe color like black or white. At the workplace, Yoshida appears restless and keeps checking the time, but his friend advises him to stay calm since they'll only end up working late if he doesn't. Later on, Eri approaches him and asks if they can talk at a later time. His friend jokes that when she rejects him, that's when their relationship will truly begin. Yoshida enjoys his dinner with Eri and finds himself once again looking at her chest. Despite feeling nervous, he manages to build up the courage to speak, but ends up choking on his words. Eri suggests they relax by playing a game where they take turns asking each other questions that must be answered truthfully. During their dinner, Yoshida asks Eri why she invited him there. In response, Eri asks if he's dating someone, but he denies it. Eri calls him out on his lie, pointing out that in the 5 years she's known him, he's always looked tired and never went home early. However, recently he's been leaving work early, shaving facial hair and taking care of his appearance. She then asks him if he's been getting close with Mishima, but Yoshida tries to clarify things. He confesses that he's been working with Mishima for 5 years, but has only had feelings for Eri. He tells her that she's always been special to him, and he still feels the same way. Yoshida questions why Eri even cares about whether or not he has a girlfriend, given that she rejected him before. He believes that if she truly didn't like him, she wouldn't be bothered by his relationship status. When Eri tries to offer an excuse, he sees right through it and presses her for the real reason she invited him to dinner. After some hesitation, Eri admits that it's important, but Yoshida's hopes are dashed when she allows him only one more question. Summoning all his courage, Yoshida asks Eri about her breast size, and she leans in to reveal that she's an Anicap. As he heads home that night, Yoshida is convinced that Eri is not interested in him romantically. When Yoshida arrives home, Sayu notices that he looks sad and asks him about it. At first, he doesn't want to tell her, but eventually he confesses that he had dinner with Eri. Sayu asks him if it was fun, but he admits that it wasn't. She offers him a hug, which he accepts, and admits that it makes him feel better. Sayu then suggests that he take a shower to wash away any negative feelings, apart from him also smelling awful. Yoshida feels ashamed that he's seeking comfort from Sayu. As he sips his miso soup, he pulls out a gift from his bag and presents it to Sayu. She unwraps it to find a new phone, and she's surprised as to why he bought it for her. Yoshida admits that it's because he wants to be able to reach her when she's out. Sayu thanks him and asks if she can really have it. She notices that he also got her a white phone case, and she mentions that she likes the color white. Yoshida is pleased to hear that, and they proceed to add each other's contact information to their phones. Despite his friend's warning that he might fall for her, Yoshida still believes that he only sees Sayu as a young girl he needs to look after. Sayu notes that Yoshida is her only friend and labels his contact as Yoshida-man, giving him a warm smile. Yoshida ponders about Sayu's genuine smile and realizes that he doesn't quite comprehend teenagers. Meanwhile, Sayu wakes up from a dream about her past sexual encounters with strangers and looks at Yoshida, wondering why he doesn't want to do it with her. Yoshida goes to work and sits with Mishima, where a colleague approaches him and questions why he declined a business trip. The colleague assumes it's because Yoshida has a girlfriend, and Mishima jumps in and asks if Yoshida is indeed in a relationship. He tells them that he is expecting a package to arrive in the next 2 weeks. His friend leaves him alone, and Mishima kicks him for no reason. Later, Mishima asks Yoshida if he would like to go to the movies with her. And although he initially didn't want to, Yoshida decides to use it as an opportunity to teach Eri a lesson for rejecting him. At home, Sayu worries about how long she can stay with Yoshida. She knows that when he finds a girlfriend, he will likely kick her out just like all the other men she stayed with before. She worries that he will do it with his girlfriend. Upon receiving a message from Yoshida, he says he will be going to the movies with Mishima. When the movie finishes, Yoshida mentions a quote from the professor, expressing the idea that encounters only feel fated after they happen. Mishima engages in philosophical conversation with Yoshida, while Sayu begins running away again. Yoshida asks Mishima if she has ever had a fated encounter, and she tells him she has, which leads to an awkward moment between them. Mishima hugs Yoshida, causing Sayu to feel sad and leave. Yoshida disentangles himself from Mishima and expresses his gratitude for coming with him to the movie. Mishima inquires what Yoshida would do if she were the person he has fated to meet, but Yoshida dismisses the idea as foolish and urges her to go home. As he walks back to his home, he wonders if his encounter with Sayu was destined by fate. Upon arriving home, he calls out to Sayu, but receives no response. Noticing that her phone is still at home, he becomes frantic and runs out to search for her, fearing that she may have been kidnapped. Meanwhile, Sayu wonders why Yoshida had that face with Mishima, a face he's never made when he's with Sayu. She starts crying, realizing that she is feeling jealous of someone she doesn't even know. At that moment, Yoshida's co-worker Mishima finds Sayu and decides to stay with her until the last train arrives in order to deter any police that may approach her. They then have a heart-to-heart talk with each other. Just then, Yoshida arrives at the scene and approaches Sayu, noting that he's been searching for her. Not wanting to get between the two, Mishima lets the two go home together, but not before stating that she demands a full explanation about everything between Sayu and him. Home again, Yoshida takes off his suit as Sayu, now only dressed in a bra and undies, confronts him. Although Yoshida wants her to get dressed, Sayu refuses and tries to sexually seduce him. Wanting to know if he's attracted to her, Yoshida answers that he is attracted to Sayu. However, he still refuses her advancements. Sayu then confesses that taking in a teenage girl is more disadvantageous than advantageous, as he could be arrested if the police found out. Yoshida then deduces that her interpretation of an advantage was her body. Sayu confirms it and admits at first she hated it, but grew to feel fulfilled by it. It's when her services become a disadvantage that she's kicked out and she's back to square one. Sayu then asks why Yoshida allows her to stay there without asking for anything other than having her do chores around the house. Furthermore, she states how nice Yoshida is, or rather too nice. So to keep her anxiety of him abandoning her at bay, she does what she can to please him and asks for him to sleep with her. On the other hand, Yoshida embraces her tightly and then gives her a long, drawn-out compliment. He finishes it off, confessing he has no feelings for her while calmly stating he does not want to sleep with someone he's not in love with. Once that is all said and done with, Yoshida has Sayu get dressed. The two then sit together and Yoshida admits that she's been more of a help to him than she's realized. This confession leaves Sayu tearfully emotional, and Yoshida offers Sayu to stay with him until she decides to go home, and Sayu accepts the offer. Internally, Yoshida thinks that's when they finally really started to live together. On her knees, Sayu requests Yoshida for his permission to be allowed to get a job. Nonchalantly, he agrees to it, which surprises Sayu for his quick response and acceptance, as she's supposed to only do chores around the house. When asked if she had any particular place in mind by Yoshida, Sayu answers she's interested in the store nearby the house called Comfort. Happy about Sayu's decision to get a job, Yoshida also notes that Sayu may find other people there that are around her age and make some new friends as well. On the first day of her new job, Sayu is shown the ropes of the job by her senior Asami Yuki, who insists that Sayu not be so polite and call her simply Asami. By dusk, the two get ready to go home, and Asami inquires where Sayu happens to live, to which she answers it's 5 minutes away from their job. Intrigued that it's the same for her, Asami asks to one day be shown her place, but Sayu refuses due to the person she's living with might not want that. The conversation escalates to Sayu heavily insinuating that she's living with a boyfriend, but she insists that that's not the case, that the person is just a brother figure to her. In light of all of that, Asami decides to visit Sayu's house and see who her brother is. While at work, Yoshida gets a text from Sayu about the situation involving Asami coming over, which leaves him flabbergasted. Both Mishima and Hashimoto both find out about the text and talk about it, while their conversation is in audible range to Ari. That night, Yoshida arrives home and is immediately gauged by Asami, who rates him as a hot older dude. Asami then introduces herself to Yoshida and opines that Yoshida seems to be a decent fellow at least. Once they're settled in the living room, Yoshida tells Asami a fabricated story that Sayu and him are childhood friends with a 9-year gap between them. Sayu, who was washing the dishes, listens in on the conversation and chimes in when more details to clarify the story are needed. During the story, Yoshida almost lets the truth slip out, but Sayu announces that dinner is ready. Impressed by the meal Sayu cooked, Asami compliments it as delicious and notes how lucky Yoshida is for having Sayu cook his meals. After the meal, Asami denotes how small Yoshida's room is, who responds that it'll be bigger once Asami is gone. In a retort, Asami calls Yoshida her soulmate, which upsets Yoshida and makes Sayu laugh on how well the two are getting along. Deciding to leave, Asami asks Yoshida to walk home with her, to which he begrudgingly agrees. Sayu also tries to tag along, but Asami states that she needs to stay since it's a man's job to escort a woman home. On their walk, Asami points out the obvious lie involving Sayu and him, and wants to know the truth to their relationship together. Although Yoshida inadvertently confirms their relationship isn't all true, but affirms that he is in fact a big brother figure to her. Relieved to hear that from Yoshida, Asami compliments him as a good guy, and from there walks home by herself. Before they part ways, they talk with each other more, and Yoshida requests that Asami be Sayu's friend, which amuses her. One piece of advice that Asami gives is that Sayu has different kinds of smiles and that Yoshida should be careful of them. The two then part ways as Yoshida is left perplexed by Asami's comment. The following night at the IT company that Yoshida works at, Yoshida finishes up his work for the day. Right as he was about to send a text to Sayu, Eri approaches Yoshida and invites him to come with her. Once again, Eri takes Yoshida to the same restaurant as before, and questions his relationship with Yuzuha and his reason for turning down a business trip. Before Yoshida answers Eri's question, he demands to know why Eri cares about his personal affairs and refuses to answer her question until she answers his. In response to that, Eri sheepishly answers that it's because she likes him. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Sayu prepares dinner for that night, but is shocked to find out that once again Yoshida is having dinner with Eri. So Sayu responds with, "Roger, have fun," and laments that the food she made tasted so good too. Back to Yoshida and Eri, it's revealed that Eri lied about being in a relationship with someone for over 5 years. Pressed further for more information by Yoshida, Eri details that her intuition told her to wait. However, Yoshida believes that Eri is bluffing to him, thinking she's just making fun of him. Eri refutes that notion and asks what it'd take to prove it to him, and Yoshida requests that they sleep together. The request left Eri aghast by the request. Yoshida then said that he was bluffing, but Eri admits that she's a virgin. In response to the confession, Yoshida begs for forgiveness for his impertinent request, and asks that Eri not lie to him. To that point, Eri confesses that she really does have feelings for him, and if he wants to do it, however, Yoshida admits he was lying. This causes an awkward silence between the two. Breaking the silence, Yoshida claims he'll never ask Eri out again, but when the time is right, he asks that Eri ask him out instead. After listening to Yoshida's reasoning, Eri admits that she understands and promises to one day ask him out. Now changing the subject, Eri asks for an answer that she asked Yoshida earlier. Returning to Yoshida's apartment, Sayu eats the dinner she made and notes how it tastes. She then notes how lonely she feels, triggering a flashback that causes her to have an anxiety attack and causes her to rush into the restroom to vomit. Yoshida then sends a text to Sayu detailing that he's coming home with Eri. However, Sayu misinterprets this as being kicked out, but he reassures her that all she does is want to meet her. This clarification left Sayu perplexed. On the way back to his apartment, a talk between Yoshida and Eri is held explaining his situation with Sayu. Upon reaching the apartment, Eri introduces herself and offers the surprised Sayu some snacks she bought at a convenience store. Various kinds of snacks were laid across the table as the truth about Sayu's relationship to Yoshida was told to Eri. Relieved that Sayu isn't in that kind of relationship with Yoshida, the room enters an awkward silence when Eri is confused by what Sayu said and how surprising it is to her. Feeling the tension behind the silence, Yoshida leaves the room to use the bathroom, and Eri proposes that she talk alone with Sayu as she's certain she has questions for her. Entering the scene again, Yoshida is tasked by Sayu to go to the convenience store to pick up some ingredients. Although appearing to be discouraged, Sayu takes a deep breath and faces a smiling Eri sitting quietly at the table as Yoshida ignorantly heads to the store. Eri then asks Sayu some questions about her backstory and then asks the bombshell question of how long she's going to stay at Yoshida's apartment. Meanwhile, Yoshida runs into Mishima in the streets. Apparently, she took a detour from the train station and ended up there. On the other hand, Yoshida is asked by Mishima his reason why he's out so late, and he answers it's to buy some stuff for breakfast because Sayu requested it. Learning that Sayu is also at his house, Mishima requests that she tag along on Yoshida's shopping trip. Back at Yoshida's apartment, Sayu gives no answer to Eri's question. Eri goes on to state how special teenage girls are and elaborates on the reason behind it. Happy to hear what Eri told her, Sayu elaborates how for the past 6 months she's run away from her problems, but deep down inside she wanted someone to tell her not to run away. Furthermore, Sayu mentions how she's survived in those months, and until she met Yoshida, who promised to set her straight. Hearing this, Eri begins to chuckle and then states how she's happy that Sayu has found a safe place. However, she advises Sayu that it's alright to be nice to Yoshida, but in an appropriate fashion. Reflecting on her past actions, Sayu confesses that she doesn't want to go back to it all. However, Sayu acknowledges that she cannot do this forever, and that one day she'll confront her past for her sake and Yoshida's. Eri then embraces Sayu and praises her for her courage, returning to Yoshida, who tries to part ways with Mishima, but she asks if it's alright if she can stay at his place that night. Yoshida flatly refuses, which leads into a minor argument between the two about her being able to stay over. That escalates when Mishima asks, what if Eri asks him the same question? Hesitant to answer the question, Mishima calls out Yoshida for having Eri over his apartment and details how she deduced it by stalking him that night. In light of that, Mishima apologizes for doing such a weird thing, but Yoshida thinks nothing of it. Once again at Yoshida's apartment, Sayu asks Eri if she's in love with Yoshida. Taking a brief pause, Eri giggles at the question and asks if that's all Sayu wanted to ask her, to which Sayu states it's an important question to her. Eri then responds that she does love Yoshida and no one else. Ever since Yoshida joined the company, Eri has had her eye on Yoshida. This makes Sayu happy to hear, because Yoshida would get the woman he wants. Sitting outside the store they bought the food from, Mishima confesses she thought that Yoshida was taking Eri home to spend the night together while Sayu was away. Yoshida denies that's the case, but then Mishima asks him if he still loves Eri, to which he answers yes. Mishima then claims that what Yoshida is doing is practically illogical then. As the woman he loves is at his house with a situation, Yoshida states there's technically nothing he can do about it. But still, Mishima argues the two can't compare with each other. In his rebuttal, Yoshida asks Mishima if she's suggesting that he kick Sayu out, and she refutes the notion. What Mishima was asking Yoshida was his priority, and states if he were to date Eri, then he'd have to hide Sayu. But Yoshida argues that'd mean he'd have to kick her out. After temporarily losing her cool, Mishima asks if Yoshida's love for Eri is sincere, and not a saturated mix of pure love and admiration. Again, Yoshida denies that fact, but Mishima then calls Yoshida far too nice, and states when you're like that, you never get the things you really want. Apologizing for what she said and for keeping him for so long, Mishima goes on her way. Finally able to return home, Yoshida walks in on Eri applying makeup onto Sayu's face. Asking for Yoshida's opinion on her new look with the makeup, Yoshida uncomfortably gives a compliment. Playfully, Eri and Sayu then criticize Yoshida for his half-hearted compliment. Later, Yoshida walks with Eri and the two talk about Sayu. Notably, Eri warns Yoshida not to do anything to Sayu as she's on her hotline now, and Yoshida reassures her that he wouldn't ever do anything like that. Before separating from Yoshida, Eri warns that Sayu is unstable and will one day unleash her emotions onto Yoshida. However, Eri is confident Yoshida will handle the situation well, as at work he's known as the problem solver. Elsewhere at the store Sayu works at, Asami talks with a coworker there about the new person working there. The coworker that Asami was talking to was named Kyuya, someone Sayu had known beforehand. Sayu arrives at the comfort break room and notices the name Kyuya Yaguchi on the work schedule. Kyuya then enters the scene, and after Sayu turns around to introduce herself, the two instantly recognize one another. Kyuya happily surprised to see Sayu again. On the other hand, she denies ever meeting him. However, Kyuya states that he never forgets a person he's slept with, leaving Sayu shocked and despondent. Just as Kyuya states he didn't see Sayu's name on the work schedule, and Sayu denies being that person, Asami enters the room. Taking note of the situation at hand, Asami kicks Kyuya out of the room, and with him out of the picture, she consoles Sayu. After work, Sayu walks home, and when she thinks that she had no encounter with Kyuya since her confrontation with him that morning, he confronts her. Kyuya strikes up a conversation with the uncomfortable Sayu, asking her how she's been since he last saw her. Sayu once again denies ever knowing Kyuya and tries to evade him, but he grabs Sayu's arm and demands that he come over to her house, just to talk with her, or so he claims. Although Sayu refuses to allow Kyuya over due to her not being allowed anyone over without his permission. Still though, Kyuya is insistent and blackmails Sayu that he'll tell Asami about their past actions together. Disconcerted by this threat, Sayu asks Kyuya if he will only just come over to talk. Hence, Kyuya reassures that he'll leave before the owner arrives. So as some reassurance, Sayu notifies Yoshida via text message about the situation. At Yoshida's apartment, Kyuya notes how clean it is, and Sayu details that she's the one who keeps it so tidy. Initially, the conversation between them is appropriate, until Kyuya asks the bombshell question about their true interactions with each other. Sayu then answers that in the 2 months she's been there, they haven't done such a thing together. Surprised by the revelation, Kyuya then tries to manhandle Sayu, and during this, Sayu smacks him. Agitated, Kyuya gets on top of Sayu as she reflects on how foolish she was to allow Kyuya over Yoshida's apartment, and the trouble it would cause him. That is until Yoshida bursts through the front door in a frantic manner, and after questioning Sayu about her relationship to Kyuya, kicks him out. Yoshida then interrogates Kyuya, who reveals that a few months ago, Sayu stayed at his house. He also claims that although Yoshida is like a caretaker to Sayu, he'll have to be responsible for her despite the risks. In Yoshida's inner monologue, reflects about his morals by taking in Sayu, and in a rebuttal, proclaims that he hopes to be the one that teaches her what's right and wrong. Unimpressed by Yoshida's response, Kyuya tries to leave, but Yoshida has him promise to stay away from Sayu. Returning to his apartment, Yoshida and Sayu have a heart-to-heart with each other about Sayu's past and well-being. When Sayu asks why Yoshida does what he does, in his response, Yoshida claims that he wants Sayu to live a normal teenage life. Tearfully, Sayu understands and thanks Yoshida. The following day, Sayu unhappily works at her job. Hence, Asami notices and asks her if something had occurred the previous day involving Kyuya. To that answer, Sayu pretends nothing happened. And because of this, Asami approaches Kyuya in the break room with Sayu in tow, and asks him if he did anything to Sayu the day before. Going along with this scenario, Kyuya admits that he asked to have sex with Sayu, who declined. Asami smacks Kyuya in the face and demands that he apologize to Sayu. Kyuya promises to do that right when a customer arrives in the store and Asami leaves the room to help said person. Once Asami is gone, Kyuya gives a half-hearted apology to Sayu, who asks him why he didn't reveal their past to her, but he recites his promise not to do that. Hearing that makes Sayu laugh, and Kyuya ever would make any inappropriate advances to her again, she'd lose it. Finding the answer a bit humorous, and before leaving the room, states how Yoshida treats her like he once did. Around dusk after work, Sayu is notified by Yoshida that he's going to be staying at work late that day, so Asami says that she'll stay with Sayu that day, and Yoshida allows it. Before they head to a special place that Asami wanted to take her, they stop by her parents' house to pick up something, which amazes Sayu because of the house's size and design. Asami reveals that her father is a politician and her mother is a lawyer. The two then walk to their destination, and as they do, Sayu reveals her backstory to Asami. By nightfall, the two reach their destination, which was a perfect spot for stargazing. Then Asami reveals why she's a Gyaru and her parents' plans for her future, which is against her own dream to become an author. When Asami told her her dream, she flipped out on Asami, but her father took her to that very spot they're at and showed her the starry night. They then had a heart-to-heart with each other, and although Asami didn't agree with her father, she still enjoyed her time with him there. Asami then tries to console and motivate Sayu, who appreciates Asami's kind words. The following day, Yoshida arrives home early from work and brings home some food. He also apologizes for not. But Sayu argues that he did, in fact, protect her. Sayu then explains that no matter where she went, it was all the same, but that changed with Yoshida, and because of it, she wishes to think about the future. In light of that, Yoshida promises to help Sayu to the best of his ability to help her achieve her goal. Elated, Sayu hugs Yoshida and welcomes him home. Once they're alone at the comfort market, Sayu and Asami talk about whether Yoshida will allow Asami to come over or not. Yoshida allows it, however. He notes his opinion of how often she comes over, to which Asami retorts it's summer break and that she and Sayu are soulmates. Right as Asami was about to stock the store shelves, an unmarked black car pulls up by the store, and its male driver looks inside for a brief bit and drives away. Asami details how the car parks at that particular spot all of the time and drives away. As Sayu looks notably at Yoshida's apartment, Sayu helps Asami study literature, who finds it a pain to do. A flashback involving Sayu and Yoshida shows them talking a bit about Sayu's plans for the future, and her hopes to stay with Yoshida a little longer. Back in the present, Sayu contemplates more about her future until Asami interrupts her. In a fib as to why she was so lost in thought, Sayu tells Asami that she was thinking about what to make for dinner. Asami compliments Sayu for being such a good housewife-like person, and suggests they get a special bento that's sold at the store during exam season. Meanwhile, at the IT company, Yoshida receives a text from who is presumed to be Sayu, and Yuzuha watches in jealousy, noting how she doesn't have Yoshida's number. Just then, Eri approaches Yoshida and asks him a question about some documents that she recently sent him. Again, Yuzuha watches in jealousy as she watches Eri and Yoshida's interaction with each, and once they separate, Yuzuha confronts Eri at her desk and asks to have lunch with her. Soon afterward, in the cafeteria, Yuzuha questions Eri about what she thinks of Yoshida, which leads to the big question of whether or not she knows about his quote-unquote girlfriend. Talking about Sayu, Eri honestly answers her thoughts and opinions about Yoshida, and that she's aware of Sayu, although saying it's not his girlfriend. Yuzuha then asks another big question, whether or not she'd be upset if Yoshida chose Sayu over her. To that, Eri answers no, because if Yoshida chose Sayu over her, she wouldn't want to interfere and become Yoshida's girlfriend unnaturally using tricks. But Yuzuha argues that Eri is merely scared. Her reason being is that even if Eri worked hard for what she wanted, she'd lose it one day, so it'd be best to patiently wait for a good opportunity. Perplexed by this conversation, Eri tries to reason with Yuzuha, who then goes on a mini rant about her fear of losing. She's then stopped by Eri, making her notice that she's caused a scene. Continuing to answer Yuzuha's question, she states that it's best to wait for Yoshida to decide whom he'll start a relationship with. Yuzuha then bluntly asks if Eri loves Yoshida, and she confesses that she does. However, anything she'd do wouldn't matter. Put off by Eri's answer, Yuzuha asks her what's wrong with her, but Eri responds by calling Yuzuha cute. Late that afternoon, just as Yoshida leaves work and gets a text from Sayu about dinner, Yuzuha approaches Yoshida and asks him if he wants to see a movie. However, Yoshida refuses as he details Sayu has made something special for dinner. Although sad about his refusal, Yuzuha then insists that Yoshida give her his contact information and demands his phone for the exchange process. Yoshida speaks in a condescending manner about himself involving texting people, saying she has nothing to talk about with him. On the other hand, Yuzuha interprets the answer as Yoshida not considering himself to be attractive enough to give his contact info away, unless there's someone special. To that, Yoshida confirms it, and Yuzuha goes on a mini rant on how it's unfair that Yoshida decides everything on his own standards. This leads to Yuzuha confessing her love for Yoshida only to backtrack that her love for him is only a little. After that is all settled with, they finally exchange their contact info, and immediately Yuzuha sends Yoshida a text, asking him out to see a movie sometime. In response to the text, Yoshida sends a text saying, "Sure," amused by Yoshida's response. She notes how childish he can be, but states before leaving that it's something she likes about him. Later that night at Yoshida's apartment, Yoshida learns that the special dinner is really some katsudon. Sayu reveals that she got it from her work by Asami's suggestion and states how the A's they eat. Yoshida asks what he is supposed to be winning, and Sayu says it should be himself, as people typically are their own worst enemy. In Yoshida's inner monologue, he reflects how he's his own worst enemy, and how he's made a lot of choices to help Sayu, but considers it doing the things he wanted to do. Sayu curiously asks if Yoshida is unhappy with their meal, and he responds that he isn't, but states how weird it is to eat katsudon in the summer. The following day, Sayu does her daily chores around the house, and Yoshida decides to help out. However, Sayu drags Yoshida onto his bed and proclaims that the chores around the house are her job. Although Yoshida insists that he helps out a little, Sayu refuses any help and tries to push him back onto his bed, causing the two to fall on each other. After this scene, Yoshida follows Sayu's advice to take a shower. During Yoshida's shower, Sayu finds a box in his closet and asks if it's alright to look into it, and Yoshida allows her to do it. Inside the box is a note from his mother and his high school graduation album. Browsing through it, Sayu finds a picture of a young Yoshida with a young girl. Yoshida finishes his shower and talks about the girl in the picture as someone who was the senior everyone admired, and recalls how the girl called him clingy. Apparently, Yoshida was in a relationship with her in high school, and it's said that he spent a lot of time with her because he thought it was natural. Eventually, at the comfort market, Sayu works by the counter with Kiyoya, and the car that stalks the store stops by again. Seeing Sayu completely distraught by the car and the backseat passenger exiting it, Kiyoya has Sayu retreat into the back room. The car passenger then enters the store and hands Kiyoya his business card, revealing his name as Kazuto Ojiwara, CEO of Ojiwara Foods. Kazuto asks a couple of questions involving Sayu and the manager of the store. However, Kiyoya brushes them off, while Sayu explains to Asami about her relationship with the man. Kiyoya then enters the back room to inform the two that the coast is clear, but warns that Sayu may not be able to keep him at bay for much longer. Sayu realizes this, however. She thinks that now is not the time. Walking home from work, Sayu thinks now that her brother is trying to find her, she has to go home. A text message from Yoshida reveals that he's going to be home late from work, and this makes Sayu sigh. Eventually, while intending to go on a shopping trip, Sayu bumps into Yuzuha and they talk. Soon, Sayu spots her brother accompanied by his chauffeur and hides behind Yuzuha in a panic. After being told about Sayu's situation, Yuzuha takes Sayu to a karaoke bar and they enjoy some drinks together. Sayu then was to text Yoshida about her situation, but was uncertain what to write, so Yuzuha advises her to simply tell it all to him straight about her situation. Still though, Sayu is hesitant, so Yuzuha texts Yoshida their location and invites him over if he wants to join them later. Meanwhile, at the IT company, Yoshida finally finishes his work, and Hashimoto suggests he head home to see Sayu. However, Yoshida is perplexed by the text that he gets from Sayu, that she's having a good time. From there, both Sayu and Yuzuha have a heart-to-heart about the person searching for Sayu. Yuzuha immediately asks if Sayu is running away from a crime, but she denies that notion, not wanting to press Sayu for any more specifics. But Yuzuha repeats what Kyoya once stated, that she doesn't have much time left. Sayu understands this. However, Yuzuha then asks why she's out shopping, and Sayu answers that she's simply fulfilling one of the conditions for living at Yoshida's apartment. In light of that, Yuzuha claims how the two are psychologically connected with each other. And how would Sayu feel if she was torn apart from him? Giving no response to Yuzuha's question, Yuzuha inquires what Sayu's relationship is with Yoshida, whether it be a guy that's helping him or are they in love. Sayu then tries to deny one of the two. Yuzuha backtracks and apologizes for her curt comments. She then advises Sayu that she should seriously consider she wants to do now. At that moment, Yoshida arrives and decides to take Sayu home, but extends an invitation to Yuzuha to join them. However, she declines. Before leaving, Yoshida promises to take Yuzuha out for a movie and leaves. Once Yoshida is gone, Yuzuha has a tearful meltdown, lamenting over how Yoshida does not look at her the same way as he does Sayu, and how he doesn't reciprocate her love for him. While walking home, Sayu asks if there's anything Yoshida would like to do, but he doesn't have a clue. They then spot a poster for the summer festival that's set to start the following day. After talking it over with Sayu, it's decided that they'll go. The following night, the two head to the summer festival, and before they arrive, Sayu notices that Yoshida is hesitant to look at her because of the yukata she's wearing. Hence, Sayu forces Yoshida to check her yukata out, and he simply calls it pretty. This causes a bit of a between the two, but when a couple of kids run by, one with cotton candy, and Yoshida buys some for Sayu. While Sayu enjoys the cotton candy, she tells Yoshida about how good it is, and then shares some with him. Just then, a young boy bumps into Sayu, and she nearly trips, but Yoshida grabs her arm, preventing her from falling. Although hesitant to continue holding Sayu's hand, she insists they continue so they don't get lost. Soon after, they watch the fireworks go off, and Yoshida's never gone to the festival had it not been for Sayu. He reflects on his life at his apartment without Sayu, but when he snaps out of it, he realizes that Sayu is gone. After crying out for her, Sayu appears behind him, saying she told him that she was going to throw away some trash. They then continue watching the fireworks and hold hands doing so. Sayu also asks if Yoshida thought that she disappeared, and he confesses that was the case, to which Sayu apologizes. Yoshida then asks if Sayu plans on returning home, but immediately retracts the question, telling her to forget about it. Once the fireworks are finished, Sayu claims that out of all of the men she has stayed with, he's the only one she gave her real name to. After a heart-to-heart with each other, Yoshida and Sayu return home together. The following day, Sayu's older brother Issa makes an appearance at Yoshida's apartment, claiming he's there to take Sayu home. She ran away because of horrible relationships she had with her mother, although her brother has found her and is set on taking her back home to her mother. What's going to happen between Sayu and her mother? Sayu refuses, claiming she's not ready yet. Issa then tries to reason with her, claiming that there are adults that would take advantage of her, but she argues that Yoshida isn't that kind of person. Later, everyone sits in Yoshida's living room area to talk things over. Issa first asks if the Issa then reveals that their mother is worried for her, but Sayu refuses to believe that and wishes to know the real reason. Issa then states that Sayu's teacher has come looking for her several times after she left, and her mother has stayed silent and keeps herself locked in her room. Yoshida then requests that Issa give her 3 days for Sayu to make a decision whether or not she'll return home or not. Seemingly reluctant to the request, Issa asks if he can have a brief moment alone with her sister, and promises that he won't take her away. Yoshida allows it, and Sayu agrees to talk with him. Soon, Issa leaves the apartment and gets into his car. Back inside the apartment, Yoshida and Sayu talk about their encounter with Issa. Getting dressed, Sayu confesses that she's a little anxious, however. When she's with Yoshida, she feels relaxed. When she's ready, Sayu heads to her brother's car, and Yoshida feels stubble on his face and decides to shave while Sayu is out. The conversation between Sayu and her brother starts out with him being relieved that she's found a decent person to stay with. Issa also reveals that their mother contacts him every day, asking if he's found her yet, noting she's become unstable after something happened, and more so since Sayu's disappearance. He suggests that Sayu return home for now and that he'll do all he can to help her. Confessing that she originally left because of her mental pain, Sayu later realized that wherever she went, it was no different, and that she was always alone. However, Yoshida made her realize how stupid she was, and the important things that she lost leading up to him. Hence, she resolved herself to think for herself and what she wants to be. Until she knows what she'll take home with her after coming all that way, she refuses to come home. Surprisingly, Issa understands and details that Sayu has changed a little, saying she speaks her mind more openly than before. He then informs Sayu that he'll buy her a week at maximum, and Sayu thanks him. Afterward, Asami comes over to Yoshida's apartment and is brought up to date about Sayu's situation. Yoshida admits that Issa gave Sayu's decision more respect than he anticipated. From there, Sayu goes in-depth about her past that caused her to run away from home. Sayu admits that she never got along with her mother, which was one of the realized that she was not going to be able to afford anything. Things like schoolwork and hanging out with friends didn't matter to her, and because of it, she was avoided in school, which was fine with her. However, a single person changed all of that. Her name was Yuko Masaka. In a flashback, Sayu and Yuko eat their lunch on the rooftop, and Yuko asks why Sayu always looks so cool, and the question baffles Sayu. Sayu considered Yuko like her, an outcast in their school, but she enjoyed spending time with her. Eventually, a group of girl bullies targeted her, and when Sayu asks why they are on the school rooftop, Yuko asks if she rejected someone on the school basketball team, and Sayu says yes, she did. Apparently, one of the bullies liked the boy that Sayu rejected. Curious as to why she's not the one being targeted, Yuko states that Sayu is beautiful and cool. Also, she doesn't look like a bad person. This makes it hard to spread lies about and to get people to hate her. Hence, Yuko was targeted because of her connection with Sayu. Although Yuko claims she's all right with it, and the bullies claim that Yuko is just a follower of Sayu, she denies that, claiming Yuko was her first friend. Time passes by, and while walking past the girls' bathroom, Sayu overhears a group of girls talking about how they taught a girl a lesson. Realizing that it was about Yuko, Sayu enters the girls' bathroom and finds Yuko in one of the stalls, soaking wet. Right when Sayu tried to confront the girls, she's stopped by Yuko. Not wanting to back down from this, Sayu grabs her hand and says that she'll never betray her and that they should fight together. Yuko then embraces Sayu, and in retrospect, Sayu confesses that she thought she acted with the best of intentions. However, this was by far the biggest mistake she ever made. One day on the roof, Sayu finds Yuko over the rooftop guardrail, and she confesses her thoughts and opinions about Sayu, and confesses how she ruined her with her presence. Before leaping off the rooftop, Yuko's final words were, "So keep on smiling, okay?" This event left Sayu emotionally devastated. Eventually, news reporters gathered by the Ojiwara household, where Sayu's mother kept them all hidden. When Sayu meets with her mother in the dining room area, she reprimands her for everything related to that girl's death, to which Sayu apologizes. However, she becomes angry when her mother asks if she really killed Yuko, and goes on a rant about her and Yuko's friendship. Believing that she's more of a hindrance than anything staying in that household, Sayu leaves but is stopped midway by her brother Issa. She explains that she's leaving because their mom accused her of killing her friend. Understanding Sayu's disposition, he agrees that she needs to have some time away from their mother for a while, and later drops her off at the Asahikawa station. Before she leaves, he gives her an envelope with 300,000 yen inside, and suggests she stay in a hotel for a while and to contact him if anything goes wrong. Sayu thanked Issa and parted ways with him, however. The money given to her quickly ran out, and the feeling of loneliness and worthlessness slowly crept in on her. Even the kindness from her brother felt like pity, and so she cut ties with him. Not long after this, Sayu runs into a man who takes her in from what she thought was out of the goodness of his heart. That wasn't the case, however, as a few days after living with him, he wanted her to have sex with him, and so she caved in and did it with him. Back in the present, Sayu admits that she's stupid, that she doesn't even remember the man's name that she first did it with. The cycle of staying with men in exchange for sexual favors continued until she met Yoshida. After this long revelation, Asami and Yoshida talk together on his balcony about what Sayu told them, and what Yoshida will do about Sayu. He refuses to get involved in Sayu's family issues, and that it's best that she return home. Asami, however, asks what Yoshida wants to do with Sayu, which makes him ponder. Yoshida informs Hashimoto and Yuzuha of Sayu's eventual departure back home with her brother Issa during lunch at his work. Hashimoto tries to put a positive spin on the situation, however, picks up Yoshida's implied disapproval as he slurps his udon noodles. Yoshida then states that because Sayu ran away from home, he could tell that her parents weren't the best. However, Hashimoto points out that her brother is at least on her side, to which Yoshida agrees with, and Hashimoto suggests not delving any deeper into Sayu's family problems. Yoshida quietly agrees and continues to eat his udon noodles, as Yuzuha and Hashimoto look concerned. That night, Yoshida runs into Issa, who waits for him outside of his apartment. At a park by a bench, Issa apologizes for his rude remarks from the day before. Yoshida brushes it off, and the two sit down and talk. They first talk about Yoshida's first encounter with his sister. The subject then changes to Sayu's family backstory, involving her parents and most of Sayu's adolescent life leading up to the present day. Issa confesses that Yoshida may be the first parent-like figure that Sayu has ever liked. This surprises Yoshida, as Issa then bows in respect and thanks him for taking care of his sister. As Yoshida brushes off the compliment as nothing special, Issa notes that only a few days remain for Yoshida to remain with Sayu, and for him to continue being by her side. Back at Yoshida's apartment, Sayu is informed of Yoshida's talk with her brother, who then notes the problems she caused for the two of them, and her fear of returning home. Sayu, however, realizes that she has to return home and to make sure that she's ready. The next day, Yuzuha eavesdrops on Yoshida talking with another coworker about how Yoshida stayed overtime to help him with some of his work. Back at home, Sayu hands Yoshida a notebook with an assortment of recipes written in it. Its purpose is for Yoshida to cook meals for himself, instead of constantly going to the convenience store to buy food for himself. Yoshida appreciates the sentiment and thanks her for it. At work the following day, Hashimoto invites Yoshida to have lunch together, but he declines as he is too busy with his work. Sad that Yoshida declined his offer, Hashimoto advises that Yoshida should take breaks. Hence, Yoshida claims he takes smoke breaks. But that's not what Hashimoto meant. Once Yoshida finishes his dinner, Sayu takes Yoshida to the spot on the hill where Asami once took her. Sayu then mentions her time with Asami there and her own self-reflection. She also thanks Yoshida for helping her realize the mistakes that she made, allowing her to avoid any fatal mistakes. To her life changed for the better when she met Yoshida, but is resolved to face her mistakes rather than stay and keep running from it. Sayu then declares that she wants to prove it in order to be able to live on her own. On the day that she leaves, she hopes that Yoshida cheers her on. To that, Yoshida promises to do it. At the break room of Yoshida's work, Hashimoto, Yuzuka, and himself talk about how the following day Sayu is going to head back home. Hashimoto suggests that Yoshida go home and spend his remaining time with her, but Yuzuka suggests that he follow her back to Hokkaido. However, Yoshida rejects that idea as too weird, but Yuzuka argues that everything he's done that whole time has been weird. Yoshida then asks what had happened with work if he leaves, but Yuzuka reassures him that it'd be alright, and Hashimoto backs her up. Yoshida then mentions that Sayu is trying to face her problems head-on alone, and that him getting involved in her situation wouldn't help in the slightest. On the other hand, Yuzuka notes that it wouldn't matter if he helped or not in Sayu's situation. Afterward, Yoshida gets a call from Asami, who asks Yoshida if he knows where Sayu is, as she's not picking up her phone and can't find her anywhere. Taking initiative of the situation, Hashimoto reports to their superior, Irie, that Yoshida and he are feeling unwell and wish to take the remainder of the day off. Irie understands and allows them to leave. Although Yoshida still has work that has to be done, Yuzuka volunteers to complete it. Driving down the highway, Hashimoto and Yoshida have a heart-to-heart about Yoshida's feelings for Sayu. Mainly, it's about how much Yoshida cares and worries for Sayu, as that's the only thing that's been on his mind as of late. Hashimoto also rants to him for diverting his attention from Sayu the past couple of days by working. Eventually, Eri contacts Yoshida, and they then arrive at Yoshida's apartment where she, Asami, and Sayu were waiting for him. It turns out that Sayu wanted to see where Yoshida worked at and wanted to walk home with him. Later that night, Sayu asks if she can sleep in bed with Yoshida because it's her last night there with him, and he allows it. Getting into the bed with him, Sayu notes how that's the first time the two of them have been so close and promises that she won't do anything weird. However, she does then grasps onto his back and asks, if Yoshida was her father, would she have been a normal girl? On the other hand, Yoshida states that he's not her father, he's just someone who let her inside of his apartment. Sayu agrees and mentions that the place was kind and warm, but stops midway. Yoshida then reveals that he has one last surprise for Sayu, and that's he's going to follow her to Hokkaido. The revelation astonishes Sayu as Yoshida pats her on the head, saying she'll be lonely going home alone, so he'll keep an eye on her and meet her mom. To that, Sayu hugs Yoshida and thanks him. In the parking area just outside Yoshida's apartment, Asami hugs Sayu as Issa and Yoshida stand by and watch. With that, Asami wishes Sayu good luck, and Sayu says she's off en route to Hokkaido. By plane, Yoshida sits next to Sayu, who rests in her chair and is covered with a blanket by him. Issa comments how he's surprised that Yoshida is tagging along, who claims he wanted to come along because he wants to support her so she could be brave. Furthermore, because she stayed at his house for an extended time, Yoshida feels that it's his duty to explain it to her family. Speaking bluntly, Issa mentions that he might have a difficult time explaining the situation to their mother, but notes that it'd greatly help Sayu in her mental state. Sayu then awakens and asks if Yoshida really is coming with her, to which he answers that the plane has already lifted and is in the air. Issa then mentions that there's a bit of a drive to their destination, and if Yoshida wants to back out, he better do it at the airport. But Yoshida flatly rejects that suggestion. The rejection makes Sayu giggle, and Yoshida reassures Sayu that he would watch over Sayu until the end. Both Yoshida and Sayu then have a conversation together about how Sayu is enjoying the plane ride, and how she never really flies often. Upon arriving at the airport, the group is driven to Sapporo by a chauffeur. This surprises Yoshida as he figured they lived in Asahikawa. But Issa details that's where a branch of his company is at, where he needs to quickly pick something up. Noticing Sayu listlessly staring out the window suggests the two spend some time together, and the suggestion cheers Sayu up a bit. Later, they visit a cafe, and Sayu reveals that she's never really been to a cafe before. When the two decide what they want, Yoshida gets the waitress's attention and orders a hot coffee for himself, and Sayu orders a green tea au lait. Just then, Sayu notices a couple of girls sitting outside on a bench, and notes that her mother didn't like it when she returned home late after school. By doing this, Sayu's mother would punish her, and Sayu would never have the time to go into a cafe. Sayu then mentions how happy she was being able to finally enter a cafe for no reason with Yoshida. A bit pleased to hear that, Yoshida then asks if Sayu is afraid to return home, and Sayu responds that she is, but notes that's why Yoshida is going with her, to help with being scared. Their beverages are then served and they enjoy them. By evening, Yoshida and Sayu are driven to Asahikawa Dairoku High School by Issa at Sayu's request. At the location, Sayu is notably nervous and accompanied by Yoshida. The two sneak into the school, avoiding the front gate as it has cameras placed around it. Although Yoshida notes that they're basically trespassing on the school grounds. However, Sayu argues he's done something far worse than that. To that, Yoshida admits that Sayu is right on that point. Inside the school, Sayu, although fearful, states that she wants to head up to the rooftop. At the top of the stairway to the rooftop, Sayu tries to open the door but is unable to unlock the door. Therefore, she goes through a nearby window onto the roof, trembling with fear. Sayu asks Yoshida to come with her and Yoshida acquiesces. Immediately, Sayu has flashbacks of her time there with Yuko, one of Sayu's friends who took her own life due to bullying, which is one of the reasons Sayu ran away. She then slowly moves across the roof and falls on her knees by the bench where Yuko and her used to sit. Concerningly, Yoshida asks if Sayu is alright, and she reassures Yoshida that she is, and details that spot she's in is where it all began. Sayu then rushes over to the fence set up around the rooftop, and curses that it wasn't there sooner and blames herself for Yuko dying. Grabbing a hold of Sayu's hand, Yoshida then notices that it was bleeding due to the fence's condition, and states that it wasn't her fault. On the other hand, Sayu argues that it was her fault as she didn't protect Yuko well enough, and Yuko should have found another friend that could have. However, Yoshida retorts that if it wasn't for the bullying, they'd be fine, and that Yuko sincerely wanted to be her friend. From there, Yoshida reasons with Sayu that it wasn't her fault, and that she needs to forgive herself, or else she'll be mentally stuck on that rooftop forever. Sayu then has a tearful meltdown, and Yoshida reaches into his pocket to get a handkerchief to wipe away her tears. Time goes by, and both Yoshida and Sayu sit against the bench on the rooftop, and Sayu thanks Yoshida for coming with her. Standing up, a blast of wind whips by Sayu's face, and she calmly states that she'll see Yuko again sometime. While leaving the school grounds, Sayu promises to buy Yoshida a new handkerchief, but Yoshida dismisses that offer and asks if she's okay now. Sayu answers that she isn't, but then stands in front of the school softly stating that she's ready to face her mother. The two then return to Issa's car and they drive to the Ohawara household, where once they enter the home, Sayu's mother immediately slaps Sayu on the face and berates her for disappearing that had caused nasty rumors to be spread around about her. Issa steps in and tries to reason with his mother and introduces Yoshida as someone who took care of Sayu for a long time. Sayu's mother scoffs at the fact that Yoshida took care of Sayu for a long time and walks away. Left standing in the hallway, Yoshida and Sayu are led into the dining room by Issa, where they all sit at the table and discuss her decision to run away from home. Sayu's mother mentions that it brought their family more problems than when she was home. Sayu gives no response, and Sayu's mother continues a bit before Sayu cuts her off, saying that her mother isn't even trying to understand. Sayu's mother brushes off the comment, but Sayu asks if her mother recalls what she said to her before she left, but she doesn't. This proves to Sayu that her mother doesn't care about or even try to understand her, commenting how Sayu has only been home for 5 minutes and she's already complaining, and then claims that she left just to spite her family. However, Sayu firmly rejects that notion and says she did it to get away from the mother who never tried to understand her and tried to blame her for her friend Yuko's death. As the conversation continues between Sayu and her mother, Yoshida begins to understand why Sayu left her family in the first place. The conversation then shifts over to about Yoshida, where Sayu's mother speaks disparagingly about Yoshida and how he took care of Sayu. Yoshida speaks up for himself, saying he was well aware of the risks of taking care of Sayu, but Sayu's mother still speaks in a rude and crude manner towards him. Sayu then speaks out, saying that time and time again her mother berates the people that Sayu is close with and hates her because of it. She then defends Yoshida, saying while she hated herself for running away, Yoshida not only helped and took care of her, but he also gave her emotional support. Sayu's mother then goes on a rant and says that she never should have given birth to Sayu. After a pause from everyone in the room, Sayu bursts into tears, and Yoshida almost throws his tea at Sayu's mother, but stops himself and drinks it instead. Yoshida then recounts how he almost threw his cup at Sayu's mother, but stopped short, noting the two different feelings within him, those being one of anger and another of calmness, both of which are balancing each other out. He also contemplates how people do not choose to be born, and how they learn to be responsible for themselves as they grow up. Speaking what he just contemplated over, Yoshida also declares that he'd like to take care of Sayu until she's an adult, but he also says he can't do that and that it's not his responsibility to do that, but rather Sayu's mother's. Yoshida then gets off his chair and prostrates himself to Sayu's mother, begging her that she take care of Sayu until she's an adult. Sayu's mother is perplexed that a stranger would do that for her, and to her astonishment, Issa begs her too. Because of the two of them begging her to take care of Sayu again, Sayu's mother has a nervous breakdown, and both Yoshida and Sayu wait outside of the house. Outside of the house, Yoshida cries and says that hearing her mother say that she never should have given birth to her is far worse than he had expected. He then says that Sayu should have gotten angry at her mother because of it, but Sayu mentions that she did want to get angry, but he did first and tearfully thanks him for it. The two then start to cry together and later both enjoy the sight of the beautiful night sky. Sayu then mentions that when Yoshida begged on his knees to her mother, she felt as if she was forgiven. Touching Yoshida's hand, Sayu says that it's all right now. She'll be fine on her own from now on, reassured by what Sayu said. Yoshida says he understands and grasps her hand while wishing her the best, enjoying each other's company. Yoshida reflects on the universe and how he met Sayu, until Issa meets with them and informs them of what he discussed with Sayu and his mother. Sayu will be able to stay at home until she graduates, and as long as she doesn't cause any trouble, Sayu's mother won't bother her. Issa also claims that Yoshida had a big influence on their mother's decision. He also notes his envy for Yoshida begging his mother to take in Sayu again, and doing it in a way that reinforced that he meant it. Before retiring for the night, Yoshida asks if he could speak with Sayu's mother again, and Issa allows it. Back inside the house, Yoshida apologizes for his outburst earlier, and Sayu's mother brushes it off as too late. She does ask if he really never did anything to Sayu, to which he firmly denies. When asked by her why he'd go so far for her, he responds that it's because he met her that day in that moment, and that's the only reason. Sayu's mother then says she'll talk things over with Sayu, and that Yoshida should return to Tokyo the following day. After leaving the dining room where he talked with Sayu's mother, Yoshida spots Sayu standing next to her brother Issa on the staircase. She walks past Yoshida and says that she wants to talk with her mother next, and once she enters the room, Sayu apologizes to her mother for the trouble she's caused, and prostrates herself to her. This action leaves Sayu's mother perplexed, as Sayu confesses that her built-up frustration for her made her run away, even though it caused trouble for her mother and brother. Again, Sayu apologizes and prostrates herself to her mother, who refuses to apologize in return. However, Sayu mentions how her private meeting with Yoshida changed her, and asks if she really is Sayu's only parent. Sayu emotionally and tearfully answers, yes. In light of this, Sayu's mother says that she needs to finish her time in school, which she's going to be held back a year, and when she's finished, she may do whatever she wants. Once her mother leaves the room, Sayu says thank you and then speaks with Yoshida about how she was able to talk to her mother calmly for the first time. To that, Yoshida praises Sayu, as Issa eavesdrops on the conversation between them. Afterward, Yoshida readies himself for bed, and when he does, he struggles to go to sleep. Eventually, Sayu joins him because she wanted to spend their last day together in bed with each other. They then talk about Sayu's being able to live her life without him, and while Sayu doesn't want their time to end, Yoshida is confident that she'll be fine. The conversation then changes to a mature request, whereas Sayu asks if she can make love to Yoshida for posterity's sake. However, once again, Yoshida refuses to accept it as he says they spent over half a year together, not as lovers or family. That in itself was enough to preserve the memory of them being together. Tearful again, Sayu embraces Yoshida as he says that Sayu is such a crybaby. Sayu then asks Yoshida if he'd like to touch her chest. However, Yoshida refuses. Later, as Sayu sleeps soundly in bed, Yoshida watches her sleep while sitting on a chair. The following day, Yoshida is dropped off at the Hokkaido airport by both Issa and Sayu. In a terminal way, Issa asks Sayu to go on ahead and allow him to speak with Yoshida alone for a bit, and she accepts. Alone together, Issa hands Yoshida an envelope filled with money for the airplane fare. However, Yoshida refuses to accept it as Issa already paid for his plane tickets. On the other hand, Issa still insists, but Yoshida still refuses and suggests he use the money to buy Sayu some new clothes. Understanding Yoshida's sentiment, Issa then asks if he likes Sayu. To that, Yoshida denies it, saying he likes older women, which Issa understands. Issa then says that if Yoshida didn't get drunk or went home a little earlier than he intended to, he'd never meet his sister. Because of that, Issa then sincerely thanks Yoshida. The two then shake hands and part ways. By the terminal gates, Yoshida talks with Sayu briefly about what he talked about with her brother. When the announcement of Yoshida's plane is now able to be boarded, Yoshida tries to part ways with Sayu, but she stops him, confessing that she's glad that she ran away from home. Because if she didn't, she'd never have met Yoshida in the first place. And after hearing this, Yoshida says that he's glad that he met her too. Sayu then confesses her love for Yoshida, but he states that he likes older women. However, Yoshida does compliment her appearance, but confesses that he cannot see her the same way that she feels for him. Asking if she'll have a chance when she's older, Yoshida says he'll be far too old for her then, and suggests that she puts the memories of their time together in a box to live her new life. Sayu tearfully mentions that a box isn't big enough to contain her precious memories with him, and then grasps Yoshida's hands and promises to one day meet him again. Yoshida acknowledges it, and Sayu starts to cry over it. With that, the two go their separate ways, and Yoshida boards his plane, and Sayu returns to her brother's car. That evening at Yoshida's apartment, Yoshida finds a special note left by Sayu, as well as a button-up shirt that she wore with her scent on it, and her own recipe book. Believing he has no need to use the book, Yoshida then tries cooking his own miso soup. But when he tastes it, he comments how bad it is, and it fails to compare to Sayu's. Shedding a tear, Yoshida falls backward and claims that he's not okay. 2 years pass by, and Yoshida at work helps his coworker Yuzuha review some documents she's having trouble with. As it turns out, Yuzuha is now the head of a big project, which amuses Yoshida as she was once a big-time slacker, and in 2 years' time she's changed so much. Eri then approaches the group and offers to take them all out to dinner in celebration of Yuzuha's project. However, Yoshida declines as he has prior commitment, Eri understands, but Yuzuha mentions that Yoshida owes her a date, which confuses him. Late that night, while walking home, Yoshida briefly talks on the phone with Asami, and then finds Sayu sitting by the same lamppost he first found her. The two then do a brief reenactment of when they first met with one another. Don't forget to subscribe our channel for more video like this.